to this episode of Art Sably in Conversation. My name is Diane Collin. This series presents artists, academics, and project leaders who dedicate their time and energy to a better accessibility for people with disabilities in the arts. You can find more of these conversations on our website, artsably.com, which is spelled artsably.com. Today, Art Sably is in conversation with Luan Carnahan, who is a neurologist specializing in epilepsy and an accomplished classical pianist. You can find the resources mentioned by Luan Carnahan during this episode on Art Sably's website in the blog section. Welcome to this new episode of Art Sably in Conversation. Today, I am with Luan Carnahan, who is a neurologist specializing in epilepsy and an accomplished classical pianist. Welcome, Luan.
Hello.
Thank you for being here. It's amazing. I followed your Instagram for a long time, and I'm very excited to have this conversation with you.
I'm very honored that you're having me on here.
Okay, so I always start by asking my guests to present themselves. Where do you come from? Where did the music start in your life? Because I know that it started early.
Sure. So I was born in Taiwan, but my mom took my brother and I to the United States when I was 2.5, so I grew up in the United States. And so that's kind of how I have the straight standard American accent. My piano life got started when I was 5. I started taking lessons. It's of course the Asian thing to do. And my mom, back in Taiwan, she grew up in more poor setting. And so she always wanted to take lessons, but they didn't have the money. So of course, she kind of put us in lessons. So that's how I kind of got put in the lessons. I took lessons all the way up until high school graduation. And in the beginning years through elementary school, of course, I wasn't very serious about it. There was even a time where my older brother got put in lessons around the same time. He's 4 years older than me. And he stuck with it for only 2 years, and he was clamoring to quit. And around the same time, I guess I was kind of the same way, was not motivated to practice. And so I was also fighting to want to be able to quit too. I think it was especially probably between 2nd to 4th grade or something like that. But my mom just refused to let me quit for whatever reason. So I pushed through lessons. I think it was to the point where like it was a situation of probably wasting time and money from the lessons just because I wasn't really practicing. But anyway, she refused to let me quit. And then around 6th grade is when I finally got more serious about practicing. It was actually because I was forced to. My parents have a manufacturing business in China, so they were constantly traveling internationally when I was young, starting from elementary school age. And so when I was in 6th grade, she found a couple through church, and they sort of became surrogate type parents, guardians, so that we would stay with them. We would live with them during the school year. They came in and stayed in the house that was just like our neighbor, like next door neighbor. So I was kind of this weird situation of bouncing between 2 houses. They basically would be, my parents basically would be gone 9 months, the whole academic school year. And so we would basically live at my surrogate parents' house, and they would come home maybe my own parents would come home maybe once every few months, just for a little bit. And so we would like stay in our own home, regular home. So it was this weird situation of like bouncing between homes. But anyway, so when we started staying with the surrogate parents, Aunt Judy, we called her Aunt Judy and Uncle Bud. That's in our Chinese culture where uh, for respect, any older generation, we outside the family even, we would call a woman aunt or uncle. So they were Aunt Judy and Uncle Bud to us, and Aunt Judy was pretty strict, and so she forced me to practice. And of course, when you practice, you tend to get better. And so then, because I was forced to practice, I started making progress. And through starting around middle school age, you start to feel more motivated to keep going, once you start to feel like you're getting a little bit better and my teacher was proud and stuff. So I kind of felt like I was accomplishing something on the piano. So then that's how I really got more momentum. And I did like the state music association, the federation, music teachers federation. So I did those, like the state, whatever those federation association. It's not really a contest, but that sort of thing. And then I also did like just local or regional actual competitions. That came more so in high school age when I was again more serious. So I was pretty serious about it for being a student. And I did go to like a few state level competitions toward the last maybe 3 years of high school. I placed. I never got first. I never won a competition, but I would usually get second place or third place. And one of the competitions, I think I went 2 years in a row. And that was like a few states, like across 3 or 4 states in my region. So I guess that's the spectrum of my competition career in high school. So that was the level, I guess, of playing. My hands are very small, so I only can barely reach an octave. So like my teacher had to really select repertoire very carefully. I didn't find this out until just recently, like a couple of years ago. But we met up, and she told me that she had a hell of a time trying to find a repertoire for me to play because I couldn't play the standard advanced high school student repertoire, the Beethoven sonatas or Rachmaninoff or something like that, or Schubert even. I managed to learn it in med school. I kind of actually learned how to stretch out my hand span slightly. So I can like reach an octave better now as an adult than back then when I was taking lessons with my teachers. And my teacher was surprised. The reason how I ended up running into her was there was this surrogate parents, her daughter had a birthday, a big celebration. She was also a pianist. I guess that's why she forced me into practicing. She played in church when she was younger. So her daughter, for her 88th birthday, 88 keys, she decided to have, instead of waiting to the 90th milestone birthday, she decided to have a big celebration in honor of her being a pianist for her 88th birthday, 88 keys on the piano. So she invited me to come and give a concert. And I had already, again, it's very coincidental, I had already been invited to give a concert. My aunt, my mom's sister, they wanted to have me do a concert in Taiwan. So I had already learned a good amount of repertoire, a few pieces. And so I played that same concert, and I learned the Beethoven first movement of the Moonlight Sonata. So I added that in as well to the birthday party concert. So my teacher, because it was in my hometown, my teacher was able to come. So over 20 some years after the fact of ending lessons, my teacher came and she heard me play now as an adult, and she asked me, she was like, how are you like reaching? Did your hand get bigger? So that's how I told her. I was like, I figured out how to gently stretch my hand span. Obviously, the length of the hands and the fingers, they don't change, but just the width of how wide I can open it. I could feel actually the difference. I remember when I was in high school, my left hand especially was tighter. The tendons in the palm was stiffer, so I couldn't open the thumb and pinky with as much. So that's what I worked on in, like, I guess med school or something like that. And even now, I kind of still work on trying to making sure to keep my finger width hand span as gently limber as possible so I can maintain the barely octave reach that I have. So that's kind of how my early career was as a high school student. I ended up pursuing medicine. Obviously, I'm a neurologist, a physician now, but even through med school and residency, I maintained the piano because it's always been a part of me. I mean, when you start it when you're 5 and you stick with it for so long, and you're serious enough to the point of pursuing competitions in high school, it was something that I really felt connected to. I did take a break from classical music in college. I ended up playing in church for the 4 years while I was in college. But then when I moved away to med school, because those 4 years where I wasn't playing classical music, then I felt like something was missing. I really felt a calling to go back to classical repertoire. So that in med school is when I decided to delve back into the classical repertoire. And I ended up learning all new repertoire on my own in med school. I always dreamed about playing like those bigger pieces, like I was mentioning in high school. My piano teachers, other students, they all got to play like Schubert impromptus and the Beethoven sonatas and stuff. So I just decided I guess that's when I started working on stretching my hand span. So I taught myself the Schubert impromptu, Opus 90, number 3. I think it's number, or maybe it's number 3, the G flat major impromptu by Schubert. So I learned that because I remember there was one of her other students. She played that in her recital, or her like senior recital, and I remember really loving that piece in high school. I did also end up learning Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C sharp minor, believe it or not. For me, I'm also very petite in stature. I'm only 4'8" and then coupled with my tiny hand span that just barely reaches an octave. Of course, Rachmaninoff is just out of reach for me, and the power, the stamina that it takes. But anyway, I don't know. By some miracle, I was just stubbornness because I just wanted to do it. So I found a way to do it. What else? Other repertoire I learned in med school. Oh, one year I learned the solo Rhapsody in Blue by Gershwin. But I had those motivations because I was already practicing in med school just to keep it up and to have a stress release for all of the pressures of being a medical student. My teacher had taught me so well that, it's not that she taught me the repertoire that we worked on when I specifically studied with her, but I learned how to practice, how to learn repertoire on my own. So she really taught me so well that I was able to maintain being a lifelong learner. So that's how I was able to go on and learn new repertoire on my own. And now with the technology that the world of YouTube, lots of piano professors, very high quality educated piano professors offer so many online classes, master courses, and also free videos. So after I learned repertoire, then I turned to these piano professionals who offer video tutorials to sharpen up and get proper educated masterclass level advice. I mean, because I didn't pursue a music degree, so I don't have the same formal knowledge of repertoire or interpretation. So that's kind of where I still take the help of piano professionals that way. But the mechanics, the basics of how to learn the piece initially. I mean, my piano teacher taught me so well that I just know how to approach kind of digging in for the first time of a new piece. And part of the reason why piano has really stuck with me is because it really helped get me through the time of my own medical condition. I'm sitting in a wheelchair. I have a disability, and it it I have a muscle disease, so it's a progressive, meaning it gets worse over time. And so it started when I was in my early 20s. Actually, when I was in med school, when I started med school, is when the muscle weakness started presenting itself. I started having leg muscle weakness, kind of like thighs and hip muscles. So walking tended to get very tiring. I couldn't climb stairs, so that was one of the first manifestations of how it was. And so that was when I got sent to the neurologist and for a workup of the muscle disease. Well, actually, is actually not the first time I presented to a neurologist. The reason why I am a neurologist and I specialize in epilepsy is actually because I also have epilepsy as a patient. So I'm also a patient myself. I had my first seizure in high school during a calculus test during my senior year. Stress, sleep deprivation, all of those things are epilepsy, epileptic seizure triggers. And getting on the medicines, my seizures are under control. But then there was a point where I ended up off seizure medicines in college, and so that's how I ended up having my third seizure at the beginning of medical school. And it was right around that time. It was at the beginning of the second year of medical school. I had a seizure again on the day of quiz. So it was because of the seizure I went back to the neurologist in medical school. And that's actually when I noticed definitely something was wrong, something was weak about my legs. And my classmates noticed it as well. I was like, I couldn't lift my thigh off the exam table very easily. I was having trouble doing that. And my classmates agree, like, yeah, that's weird. So that's when I started the workup for the muscle disease. They sent me for EMGs. And then they sent me ultimately to a neuromuscular specialist in town, and I went and had a muscle biopsy. And all of this happened toward the end of second year. I mean, it takes time to get in with all the doctors and doing the initial tests. So third year, medical school was rolling around, and that's the year that all my classmates were heading off to the start of their third year clinical rotations. But because my neurologist wanted to refer me out of state to do my muscle biopsy to a more specialized academic center that had I guess, more advanced pathologist to do the muscle biopsy. So she had already started recommending that I go ahead and take the entire year off, because to travel all that time and then I would have lost too much time. The month, whatever it is, it would have been thrown off. And then when you can't catch up, because the schedule is very set. Every month is a new rotation, and you have your whole year's schedule laid out and kind of made for you. And it becomes very, in the world of medicine training, especially, everything is very laid out and scheduled. And so you can't really deviate from that. Or if you do, I mean, of course, life things always come up, but it's very hard. And so my neurologist just recommended me to take off the whole year. So that's so I could just focus on getting the diagnostic workup. And it was that year that that was the second year of doing the piano concert. So that was how I had so much time to practice, that I was able to learn the Rhapsody in Blue by Gershwin, the whole 25-minute piece. It's cool. That was like the good thing about that year, that whole, medical diagnosis. I mean, that was the most difficult time. I remember being in the neurologist. It was before she even sent me off to the muscle biopsy, but she could already tell from my exam findings and that she knew this was some sort of progressive muscle disease. And right then and there, she was already recommending that I start using a mobility aid. And I'm 20-something, early 20s, young person. And that was a big shock. I remember that day when she said that in the appointment. It's like the room kind of became muffled. It's like this weird sensation of I was there, I was hearing what she was saying, but it became like a outside perspective. I don't know, it was the most bizarre thing. And I guess it was just the emotional processing of it. And we came out of the appointment. I was in tears, and both my parents happened to be there for that appointment. So luckily, they came back. They were in the United States at the time, so they were there, the support kind of going for this medical appointment. And my mom was there along the whole way. She went with me when I had to go out of state for the muscle biopsy. So even though my parents traveled internationally, because they were constantly in China, doing business, or other in Europe, for their manufacturing business. But she was always, when something medical happened, she would always come back. The seizure, that happened in medical school. She was in China at the time, and the seizure happened. And of course, when you have a seizure, you can't drive temporarily. And the state that I lived in was the standard no driving for 6 months. And that changed everything of that year, because I was living off campus at the time, so I couldn't drive to campus. So she came and she got me an apartment on campus where a majority of the students live, and it was they just walked across the street. So that was temporarily, my housing was shifted, and it was just the bare bones. She got me the apartment, and there was a mattress. I probably had a kitchen table to eat and maybe study, but that was it. It was about the most bare bones, place, because I had my other place that I lived the standard place.
What about pianos? Where
I
did
did
you
have
find
a
the
piano.
pianos?
Coincidentally,
Okay.
that's how I ended up I was practicing all this time during med school, because we took a little rinky-dink upright. I don't know. We moved. I moved city. Of course, this whole medical training process, you have to move every single time you're like changing to a new training location. So I took a piano with me almost everywhere I went. So at the start of my third year clinical rotations, after I completed my the muscle biopsy and got back on schedule to start my third year and fourth year clinical rotations, I had to go away again out of state to do that part of training, because our school they only had enough spots to house a third of our medical school class. And then everybody else gets sort of sent all across the United States. They have partnering hospitals, academic places that take medical students. So a large portion of my friends had already gone up to, Michigan and they were already up there. So it was funny. I had actually it's a lottery system. I had randomly been lotteried into staying on the campus in the medical school, but because my friends were all up in Michigan, I actually traded and gave up my spot, because a lot of times when the people who have families, spouses in the same place where the medical school campus was, of course, most people wanted to stay there. So I actually gave up my seat to stay on campus. But when I moved up there for third and fourth year, then we took the piano up there. And then when I moved again to another location for residency, we took that same piano, so it definitely made its way on the rounds across the country. So that's how I ended up having access to practicing the piano all those years.
When did your medical condition prevent you from playing the piano?
Yeah, so I noticed in residency, my arms, my shoulders had started getting weak. They were already starting to get weak toward the end, later years of med school, but definitely in residency, probably about halfway through. It was probably shortly after I gave that concert at the residency graduation ceremony for like one of the upper class who graduated before me. I could feel that my shoulders were starting to get weak. I was still able to play, but then I think it was my third year of residency that I could no longer play, or I was getting too fatigued to play the fantasy impromptu. And so I knew at that point that it was, the progression was starting to become serious. And that actually made me sad to where I no longer wanted to play. I was still physically capable of playing at that point, but I knew I was losing it. And so probably my last year of residency for sure, I actually just was not motivated at all. And looking at the piano just made me sad because it was a reminder that it was, again, it was yet another thing that was being taken away from me because of the medical condition. And so when I moved for fellowship was only 1 year. And so I didn't end up taking a piano because it was only 1 year. And anyway, I was already getting sad that I was losing piano. But then when we moved finally now to, as my job, my final location of where I live now. Once we settled in, like, again, I got that itch. I missed piano, and I just had that need no matter what. And I talked to my mom. I said, is it worth it to get a piano again here? And of course, like the piano at home in my hometown, that's so far away. So it wouldn't be worth to take that piano here. But she was like, well, go ahead and get it. If it's gonna make you happy, then do it. You can play it for however long that you can. If you can only play it for a month, then that's okay. I mean, she said something crazy like that. And I've always been a bit of like a Steinway person. And when I was 16, like that was a milestone birthday because I came home one day from school and like, oh my God, there's a Steinway grand piano in the living room. So that was what was at home and what I got to practice on all that time of being at home. So of course, when I moved here and I was working as an attending and I wanted to get piano back, I said, is it worth it to get a Steinway? Of course, being as expensive as they are. And so she gave me, because she was supportive and she gave me permission to want that and saying it was okay. And because I was just afraid of that it would be a waste, like you spend that much of an investment and literally, what if I could only play a short amount of time? So, but she said, okay, if it's going to make you happy for a month, then that's good enough. And that's good enough for me. So she helped with making that purchase. So I was very lucky to have her support. But because my shoulder muscle progression was getting worse, it did get to a point where I physically was no longer able to maneuver my arms around the keyboard. And also I was working, technically I was working full-time hours, but I was only working part-time productivity compared to what the other physicians, what a typical full-time physician, the productivity expectations and the schedule, the call schedule. I had accommodations. Actually, I was very lucky. I had accommodations throughout residency for the call schedule because, again, physically, because of the disability, because of the fatigue and the muscle weakness, I ended up having to approach my program directors and the chairman of the department at my residency program. And I said, I'm about to quit. I'm physically ready to drop. I can't go on, like this. And luckily, I had a very good mentor when I was a third-year medical student. And he gave me advice. I called him when I was about ready to drop in residency, ready to quit. And he said, well, why don't you approach your program director and see if there's something they can do to help? That surprised me. I never would have even thought that I could ask for accommodations. I would never had the nerve, or it just never even crossed my mind. I thought my career was going to be over. So they miraculously ended up agreeing, and they made it very easy. I mean, I didn't have any paperwork, didn't have to go through filling out FMLA forms, didn't need a doctor's note to, say I needed it in writing. Of course, they could see. I mean, I was riding around on a scooter. At that time, I was able to get up and walk. I'm still an ambulatory wheelchair user. So while I need the wheelchair, I'm much more reliant on the wheelchair now. I can only walk a very short distance. But back then, I was able to get up out of the chair or the scooter. I used the scooter at the time to ride around the hospital. But I could go in the hospital rooms and the clinic and do an exam on the patient. So all of the actual pertinent stuff that we needed to do for training and to learn how to do physically, I was able to do. And it was just the call schedule that was too hard on my body, too fatiguing, because I had actually gone through intern year doing all the same schedule. I didn't say anything. I never even brought up the need for accommodations up until that point. Even as an intern, the only thing I ever had to do was like, I had to find a spot to like put my scooter at the hospital. And even then, I never officially requested anything. I just kind of picked a spot in the intern call room that first year, and I just put it there myself. Didn't ask anybody, didn't really have any, there was no formal, to do about it. And of course, no one's gonna touch it. Everybody just left it alone. And then you would go home and have this post-call day, but that's, you were coming home working from a 28-hour shift, and you would have the afternoon to sleep and rest, and then you would have to go back to work the next day. And that was when I got to the breaking point at the end of my first year, transitioning into the start of the actual formal neurology residency year. That was when I was to the dropping point, and that was when I approached my neurology program directors and the chairman of the department. And there's also this sense of you have to compensate when you have a disability. You have to work harder. I mean, I don't want to say I worked harder than everybody else, but it's this, you have to prove yourself. And I felt that way anyway. I've always had this chip on my shoulder, because I always felt like it was this weakness, having the scooter, the mobility aid, it always felt like this elephant in the room. So I guess that really motivated me to make sure that I did a good job and I learned what I was supposed to be learning. And so I got the evaluations that I got during intern year. And so I guess it's, again, I pushed myself that hard, and I proved that I really wanted to be there, and I proved that I was capable of being a hard worker, but that my body, medical condition physically was not going to allow it to continue.
But at this time, you were still, so you were trying to get back to your Steinway too, right?
Yeah. Well, that was, yes, when we moved here back to being out of training, and when I was working, then this was a couple of years after I graduated fellowship, when we moved to where I'm working now, that yes, we did finally end up getting the Steinway is what I have here at home, is what I'm playing on my videos on social media. And so during that time working, the beginning years of working as an attending, I eventually it did get to the point where I couldn't raise my arms to play anymore. And so I did stop playing. But again, it was like that sense of, oh my gosh, I can't lose piano. So at the same time, when I was knowing in the back of my mind, for my mental health reasons, I needed to start accepting the fact that I was going to lose piano out of my life, I decided anyway to build myself. I came up with this harness design. There's this a metal frame that I came up with, and I hooked up straps to it so it supports my arms kind of dangling in the air, and so that facilitates me being able to move around the keyboard. My husband ended up figuring out how to make it. I mean, it's this, it's a very kind of like duct tape together, there's like zip ties and an elastic strap from a fabric store, and a small dog harness that I wrap around my arms. It's just hanging from a metal frame that's zip tied to the piano bench. I mean, very rinky-dink stuff, nothing fancy or expensive at all. These are just very cheap materials. They just get anywhere. Yeah. But anyway, he built it, and so
but still, right? It's how did you? Like, okay, let's try to figure out what works, and let's just bring a frame and some straps, right? And so how between the moments where you stopped and the moment where you said, okay, I need this frame, how long was it?
Probably a couple years.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, probably a couple years. But I mean, the way I figured out, I think being a neurologist and understanding the neuroanatomy, especially the muscles, the specific muscle groups, I knew exactly what muscles were weak and the exact movements that I needed help to maintain my arms. And so that's how I came up with the design of what the harness and the frame needed to be. Because in all my search, when I knew that my arms were going and I was no longer going to be able to play naturally, I had reached out to some local company who made an exoskeleton type arms, to hold up arms for children. And so I did that. I went to the Hanger Clinic here in town, and they were very gracious and willing to make me it's like one of those, like for scoliosis, like a torso, a TLSO type frame. And then the attachments, they had like this metal frame, but that device actually wasn't able to help me because
then you don't move
it was
anymore.
too limiting. Yeah, there was no movement. There was no lateral movement. And the way that it actually held up my arms, it did not hold up my arms correctly. It actually put my arms this way. And we don't play the piano this way. We're with our elbows like this, in this type of a plane. Like we play the piano this way, where the arms need to be bent like this. And so that device failed, to meet my needs. So that wasn't able to help me with the piano. So that's what then, I knew, okay, I need to be able to figure out something to hold my arm in this position, because the specific muscle groups that's weak in me is especially the shoulder rotator cuff muscles. So that encompasses like the shoulder, the deltoid muscle. That was probably the first muscle that went, but it also encompasses the muscles around your shoulder blade. And especially, so the external rotators, so the muscles that turn your arm out that way.
Yeah.
See, I can't do that. I literally, I have to push with my other hand to make it turn this way and to hold in this position, because my elbow flexion and extension, so the bicep muscle and the tricep muscle, when your elbow is in this position, I can hinge up and down like this at the elbow. And my wrist and my hands are completely normal strength, full strength, luckily, thank goodness. And so the small dog harnesses that I have zip tied, if you see from the videos, it's, one cuff is here and one cuff is above my elbow, and it's cuffed in a way, hanging from the straps, that it holds my arms in this external rotation. But my finger strength, my hand grip, my wrist flexion, extension, and all of the movement that we have here, that is normal. My neurologist, she's like, surprised. She didn't know I played piano until I started posting on social media. And like, it's funny, there was a neurologist group for women neurologists. They stumbled on a video. I came to an appointment and she was like, "Oh, you're famous on the internet." And she had stumbled upon my video and she's like, "How are you playing?" It's like, "Whoa, what is this?" And then she was like, "What?" She held her hand up to my hand, and of course everybody's hand was bigger than mine. And so she's like, "Oh my gosh, how are you playing with such small hands?"
When you started showing that, you must have had a lot of questions, right? You decided to go on Instagram and show your story about the frame. And so how did you come up with this idea of saying, okay, let's go live on social media and show this?
Well, I remember, of course, being in it was a horrible devastation. It's this grief when you're faced with this horrible news of, your life changing and shifting in from a healthy world to be an able-bodied person to shifting into this world of disability. I mean, it's a completely different realm. I feel split as a person. I mean, it's this very bizarre feeling that I've lived with my whole life. The shift in my self being able-bodied all through high school and college, and then starting in med school. So I know how painful it is to go through that process and grief and coping. And I had that mentor in medical school also, as part of, how he helped me so much, is he helped me get established with a therapist. And the therapist is who helped me learn how to cope and just face all of the, the difficulty, the mental, the emotional difficulties. She taught me how to cope with that. So I started posting on social media, one, because I guess I just wanted to help encourage other people to show what's possible. And to show people with disabilities that you can dream, you can have a career. You know, I became a doctor. I'm a musician, and so I wanted to show other people with disabilities how just to give a source of, because for me, I didn't have that when I was going through it. If I would have had another person to see that, okay, life isn't over, you know, there can still be a lot of possibilities that you can do, you can achieve, if you want to.
Yep.
You know, you have to put in the work to do it. But that's just, I didn't have a role model like that, someone that I could turn to, because traditionally, like, I feel like society, not only the physical barriers of having a disability with just being able to get a wheelchair to a public place, that's the physical side of disability, of how it's limiting. But then there's like the social construct of the limiting factor of disability, where that it's just this dichotomy of able-bodied society and disabled community. And able-bodied general society sees disabled people, I guess, with a certain stereotype. So there's not this representation out in mainstream society where you see teachers with a physical disability, doctors, musicians. I mean, in this, since posting on social media, I have actually, many people have reached out, you know, through messages and commenting on the videos that there's a whole world of us musicians with disabilities that I never knew of. I thought I was alone.
No.
And so that's the way I started.
We are a lot.
And I'm
I
not
can tell
alone.
you.
There's a lot of musicians with disabilities. Like that's wonderful and that's amazing. And so I think we need more representation.
Yeah, I like seeing you on social media because I learned, so when I learned you were a doctor in disability studies in the academic field, there is this kind of opposition world between the medical and the social model. And you are representing both the medical and the social model and being an artist. And when you do your videos, you show how difficult it is to practice and how the piano. I love this part of one of the conversations in that you have frequently. Actually, I'm taking one in November, for example, where you were practicing something and you were saying, but why do the piano factors make these pianos so big with such a big, can they do something that would accommodate me and with my smaller hands and with my
narrower keys? Yes, I remember the video you're talking about. Yeah, that was a big frustration that this is all going through my mind.
And you were even saying these pianos are built for big men like Rachmaninoff and Beethoven with big hands.
Huge hands.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, his hand is probably like double, like two of my hands put together. It's probably, you know, the size of Rachmaninoff's hand. That unfortunately, the modern piano was made for keys to fit that hand. And actually, and just not having anything to do with medical limitations, but just, you know, all pianists are affected by the size. When there's actually the PASC, there's this organization that they're trying to advocate to incorporate these narrower key options into the piano world. I don't remember the abbreviation of what it stands for, but there's this, PASK is the organization that's trying to advocate for narrower key options for pianists, because actually when you look at the statistics, females, the average handspan of a female can only reach a ninth. And so the bell-shaped curve, you know, most women fall, you know, in the realm of a ninth. And then there's this little overlap where, again, you know, the 10% of women, those are traditionally the ones who have the, you know, ability to go on and become famous concert pianists, you know, that we know of, Yu Wang, you know. And as an example, just one example, there's many female concert pianists, but you have to have a certain handspan size to be able to reach the repertoire that is required to be a concert pianist, playing these concertos and everything else, you know, advanced that I can never, you know, I can only dream about playing, but never will be able to. You know, I love the polonaises, especially Chopin's heroic polonaise in A5 major, Liszt, La Campanella, all of those, like the famous pieces that, every classical pianist can play. Like I will never be able to play that because my hand span just isn't there. And the same thing with men, the bell curve shape with men, there's this overlap of like the 10% of men who, this certain population of men who say that they can only reach a ninth, so that's small for a male hand size. And so statistically, that's why when you look at the hand size, when you look at the population of people where the majority number of pianists fall, the modern piano size is actually not serving the majority number of people where their hand spans fall.
Yeah,
And of course, I'm like on the extremely smaller side. I'm not even anywhere near close to the size of the average female hand span. So like those are the challenges that I face. Like it's way more, hand span width-wise than even the average, female hand size.
Yeah, but then you also show how you practice and how every day it gets better, like everybody else. Like practice your piano, and every day you get a little bit better. And so your Instagram channel is full of either these videos where we see you practice, or these videos where we see you in your context of life. And I love that. I love that you're.
I'm so glad. Yeah, I'm glad that it resonates with you, and hopefully that it resonates with other people. Yeah, I heard, because there was a couple of videos where being in the classical community, there's a certain minority of elite of certain opinions that are hard, critical of other musicians. And like they were, if you don't show the video in top performance, performance level quality, playing, it's like you're gonna get eaten alive. Like there was a couple of videos where people were just, that is horrible, you're horrible. And they're criticizing the speed, the tempo, and then the technique. I mean, everybody's got an opinion, so there is this, yeah. And one commenter mentioned that, hey, they appreciate the fact that I show normal life and how the real process is. Like it sounds not good and perfect and performance level in the beginning, and it's okay to show that. So I'm glad that resonates with you.
I suggest you do you. You don't care about the others. Yeah, no, it's great, but it's social media, so everybody has an opinion on everything. But yeah, no, I think it's fascinating. It's full of little details of things that a pianist lives every day. So that's great. But especially seeing you play with this frame, for me, it was like, that's really brilliant. It's really like, okay, let's remove the problem that is causing my arms to not hold, and let's use the hands, and let's use a basic frame. And it's yeah, I love that idea. I want to go a bit further on that. Do you have any projects that you are working on now that we know you on social media?
Yeah, I happen to be recording. Actually, I completed it. I worked on it for 3 days this week, actually. So it's very coincidental timing. I'm very lucky that I, kind of met you, and we get to be having this conversation. But I recorded it, and I want to try to release and make a public debut as a recording artist, and release the Chopin's Nocturne Opus 9 No. 2 in E flat major, to release it to streaming platforms. And that is a whole new ballgame. I don't know anything about it. I kind of, again, YouTube tutorials, I kind of learned in little snippets here and there from people's videos who explain the process. I had to delve into more online tutorial videos about the audio engineering side of putting out a recording of decent quality. And so words like compression and like just even the microphone position and miking a piano is way more complicated, than whatever other settings potentially. And technically, like I only have the one mic, and so I'm not technically recording in stereo don't tell the streaming platforms that. Hopefully they'll still accept it. But all of those things that, all these terms that I just have no knowledge of. And I don't know anything about the post-production side. I'm actually, this is very much, I guess, analogous to my harness. It's like this rinky-dink zip tie situation. Like my brother is the one that got me this microphone, this new one. He got it for my birthday last year, which I kind of was sitting around with not doing anything with it because I didn't know how to use it. So yeah, anyway, so when he visited, he came from Thanksgiving and he was like, we need to get you set up with this microphone. So we worked through it, we set it up, made it work with my phone. It's one of those USB mics, and it comes with an app. And so in the app, you have all of these settings, and that's what I didn't know anything about. So I had to go to YouTube and look for the online tutorial explanations. And so that's what I was doing this week. I was like learning how to tweak this and that, and then the amount of reverb and the timbre, or like how much, like the tone quality. All of that is through this app. So that I managed to complete that. I recorded for 3 days this week. It was the minute you push the record button, it's like you forget how to play. You forget the piece altogether. There's a bunch of starting and stopping, and then like playing halfway through, you suddenly forget what note you're playing, or you play a wrong chord, and then that throws you off, and suddenly you forget where you are, or you use a wrong fingering, and that subconsciously throws you off. So then you have a brain fart. Mm-hmm. But I managed to finish the recording. I took some photos yesterday for the album cover, and I played around with it. So it's me, Luann Carnahan. I'm releasing Chopin's Nocturne in E flat major, Opus 9, number 2. Well, coming to you on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, and all the other streaming platforms live Monday.
We will put the link. There is a resource page with this interview. So we are gonna be able to have the direct link and click and have your release.
How exciting.
Okay, I have one last question for you before we conclude this interview, and it's about people who might have counted on your life, have helped you figuring out some of your path, especially in the musical path. I would say, if you have 1 or 2 people to think of, in that era, who would it be and why?
Well, yeah, starting off in the very beginning of my life would be my mom. She's the one that put me in piano lessons, as Asian parents do. But she is also the one that would not let me quit. I mean, she was paying for 2 years worth of lessons that were a complete waste of money. and good or bad, I mean, I'm not to say that all children should be forced to do something that they're not enjoying at the moment. But for me, I was lucky that it ended up working out, and it is what was needed to be in my life. Because if I would have quit lessons, there would be no piano, and then I wouldn't have had piano to fall back on to help me to learn to cope and grieve as I was going through my own medical process. So my mom, first and foremost to her, thank you for not letting me quit piano when I was clamoring to quit when my brother was quitting. And then Aunt Judy, my surrogate, parents, when she forced me to practice, that's when I got better. So for sure, that she played a big role in helping my progress. And then, of course, my piano teacher, Mrs. Manassian, I always called her. I can't call her by her first name. She goes by Joyce. I've heard other people call her, but that's actually her middle name. Her I guess, name is Mary Manassian. I hope you don't mind. I'm kind of sharing your name. But Mrs. Manassian, she was, my piano teacher that I took lessons from. I actually didn't start with her. I started lessons with someone else that I think I was with this first teacher for maybe like 6 months or something like that. But my mom, because, in her circle of friends, her Asian friends, their teacher was Mrs. Manassian. So my mom changed me over to her. And she was the one that I studied with from age 6 to my high school graduation. I graduated high school when I was 17. I mean, I have her to thank. Like, my teacher just gave me such a good foundation and piano technique that I don't struggle with those things, how to maneuver, how to play arpeggios, how to play trills, how to play scales, how to, the only thing is I struggle with octaves because my hands don't reach. So there was no point of perfecting octaves because I just can't play pieces that play repetitive fast octaves. So, so that is, I guess, one technique that I don't have any mastery level of. But yeah, I cannot speak highly enough of my piano teacher, and she taught me how to learn. I mean, writing and fingering, and in the very beginning, like it's a very painstaking process. Like when I sit down to look at a piece for the first time, it's like, it can take hours or something, as you're working your way through it. And then you change fingerings, you play it around and you figure out what works and what doesn't work. And then even as you play it longer and you get it faster, closer to speed, like then you find out that fingering doesn't work. So I'm constantly changing. And then practicing hands separate, putting hands together, dynamics, all of that musicality stuff. I mean, all of that process, she just gave me such a tremendous foundation that she set me up to be able to be an adult lifelong learner.
Well, we arrive at the end of our interview. It was really fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing your thoughts. And we will share also your Instagram page so that people can have a look at these amazing videos that you post.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. I'm so honored that you reached out to me, like little old me. I'm kind of like not, I'm like nobody in the realm of, just social media. So I'm so honored that you reached out. And I know I kind of, I took probably a month to get back to you. I know you originally reached out in December. So, but I thank you for being patient and that you didn't give up on me. So, and you were so kind and still responsive and wanting to have me on. But I saw your email and I was like, oh my gosh, wow. Like that's an honor. It's an honor.
Thank you so much. Well, have a fantastic day and good luck with the release and enjoy.
Thank you so much. It was very nice meeting you.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.